Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Wednesday, November 26, 2025, and today's topic, I'm going to wrap up a mini series. I think this is the third video of drawing hands, like the basic forms, and today the focus will be the fingers. But before we begin, welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use a timer to stay focused and to build a habit. I'll start a 10-minute timer. But yeah, there's a lot more that could be said about drawing hands. They're one of the more difficult things. I mean, I think drawing heads is probably the most difficult, and then next is probably hands. And then maybe next would be like just the figure, like overall. I also have other, if you're looking at the figure drawing playlist, I have other videos about drawing the hands. So look around in there if you want to know more. But I wanted to not overwhelm people. If you're interested in learning. Otherwise, you can just use these videos to sketch along with. That's pretty much what I use it for, but also it helps me to kind of go over some of these important, but like they're basic, but they're still important things. But let's focus on the fingers. So we started with like, just to kind of get warmed up. So we started with the palm, which I just said was like a square. If you draw kind of a rectangle, or if you add onto it like that, or if you just kind of draw more of a rectangle but then kind of give it, that would be like the knuckles. So, and those are sort of the prominent ones, the middle finger and then like the index finger, because the bones kind of go like this and there's like an arch to it. Or you can just like add to this, like that shape. So that's like kind of the first thing. And then I talked about how to turn it into like forms. So for example, because when you're looking at it straight on, it looks kind of like a flat shape. But then to give it some form, you might want to do this kind of thing. Like a box basically. And then like you can add on, if it's more of a square, which is the palm, you can add on, and then that'll be the, like yesterday's video talked about that, like the different, it's kind of like a mitt or a gauntlet, this kind of thing. And that's just the form of it. And it does taper. The fingers aren't like exactly straight. And then the thumb, I'll kind of go over that. But yeah, there are more videos where I talked, like there's a lot of stuff, like there's different information because there's a lot of stuff about the hands. They're complex. So that's like kind of basically what we went over. The complex thing about the hands, and also like the fingers, and yeah, because of the fingers, the hands can be kind of complex because they kind of like, they each sort of do their own thing, and they have like their own forms and stuff and shapes and like gestures, and then also it moves in perspective. However, that I started with the palm because that's kind of like the order that you could go in. You could think about like what the palm is doing, and then what the knuckles, like the first set of knuckles, and then like onwards. And then next we'll kind of talk about like the fingers, and you can kind of think about it like, I'll just use this right here, like what the index finger and like the pointer finger, or the middle and like the index finger, I guess that's the pointer finger. You can kind of start to move the fingers around, because usually that's what's going to show up. So the thumb is usually the thing that's going to be like the primary. So like these three right here, they show up a lot as far as like the look of the hand. So an example is, just real quick, so this goes into the idea of like the gesture of the hand, because there's all these gestures because it moves in space. So for example, you could just kind of scribble something, like doodle something, and just do this. And it's these three fingers that, like, they do a lot. They have like the most strength and the most like muscle and like the shape of, because they're doing a lot right on this side. And then it's a matter of figuring out, okay, well, what are the other, like, what's the rest of the hand and like the other fingers are doing. So that's where like the forms come in, because once you do kind of this gesture, you kind of have to figure out, okay, well, what forms, like what's happening. So one, it helps to kind of understand like the box and all that. Now the question is, well, why can't I just look at like reference? Well, you can. Like I would do studies of hands, like, but like use, if you want to know how to construct it or just draw it from imagination like I'm doing right now. And also depending what you're drawing, you might just need this much and then look up reference. I mean, there's all these, that's like a different topic, all these reasons for doing, but this is specifically knowing how to draw it like this, like construct it. So from here, that's that box right here. We talked about that box, and then you're going to get this first, like that's the extension thing that I talked about here, the first set of knuckles. And it kind of goes with like the bigger forms, so like the arms and then the palm and then the first set, and then the fingers kind of can kind of do this. Kind of. I mean, they do a lot of different things. Sometimes you have to play around with it and maybe make it look not correct. Don't be afraid to redraw it. So let's say you draw something like that and you think, well, I don't know that that looks that great, but that's why you're like, we're sketching. So let's just redraw that. So I'm going to draw this, and then you have this box right here. And then we'll go back to what these other videos talked about, like the basic shapes, because that's really what it is. So let's talk about, so establish like the thumb, and then that's that box right there, but then you need that, like that's what's happening. That's that extension part I was talking about. And then, and hands are always tricky. They're not, you have to practice. So maybe kind of like this. And maybe it actually wants to go like this. That's just coming off of this. It's an idea. And whenever I'm looking at reference or whatever, I see if I can like do this. I see if I can figure out like the construction of it, just so I can draw it. And these are just suggestions. You can draw it, use whatever way you want. Not saying that this is the correct way. And yeah, just by practicing, I sort of figure it out also, just how to construct it. And then you can even get like from here, you can get more of the gesture of it. You can to get a little bit more of like because hands also look different. So let's just do that one. This video might be a little bit long because, I mean, we're talking about all the fingers. So a few different things. So right here, I'll talk about, so let's say you have like the palm, like of the hand that we've been talking about. And then when you add like that first row of knuckles right here, you can start to get a little bit more separation, and it'll start to like do this to like spread the fingers. So then you can get a little bit more of space. kind of like this. And then you have like the second set of knuckles, and there's an arch to it. And then the fingertips, so there's like an arch here, and then here, and then it gets more obvious like the further out it goes. So kind of like this. There's like an arch, and then a little bit more, and then like it's just more extreme. And that's how you can start to spread the fingers. You have to practice it though. And then the palm area is more of a square shape. If you were to take this part, the fingers, it's about like whatever this is, the palm, like. But I mean, it looks different. A lot of times you can just kind of eyeball it. For the palm of the hand, let's just kind of keep it simple. I'm going to just keep it as a square, and then the thumb, so that's the knuckle of the thumb, and then this one, that's how you get that shape. So this shape is pretty important, and in humans the thumb does like all sorts of things, so I'll just kind of focus on the thumbs a little bit. But like if you just wanted to keep the fingers together, they're kind of like that. There's like slight differences, so that's if they're together. Part of the difference is like the muscles right here. You've got this muscle, and then like this muscle, and then like to bend the knuckles right there. But as far as like the thumb, it does a lot, and it has like a lot of different looks to it because it rotates and because the hand like moves around. So for example, like sometimes it's kind of like this, and I haven't even gotten into like the foreshortening. This is kind of like the foreshortening. So sometimes the thumb is sort of coming at you. And then because it does a lot, it can be used as like a support for the hand. It can support some weight. It can go like this. It can rotate around. So I usually just show it as like a kind of a circular shape. But it has like cylindrical and like squarishness to it. I mean, the hands are complex, don't get me wrong. You always have to give it a little bit of thought, depending on how complex the pose is. I might have to start a new page. Let me grab a new sheet of paper. So depending on where you're at, I would take it a step at a time. I started the series with sort of the most basic, but also the most kind of important. Generally speaking, you can get away with like the simple sort of stuff that I was showing, but then it gets more complex, as it's going to. I mean, it's a complex subject. So as far as like the basic forms, so we've done all the like the box and everything. So we've done all this kind of thing. Then the fingers themselves, so let's say that you have it go like this. Kind of like, let's just to begin with. So in general, the fingers will be cylinders. And then if you're wondering, well, how long to make the fingers, like I was saying, so this is in perspective, so it's a little bit more difficult, but it's kind of important to get like the proportions correct. So just to get warmed up here. So these are like the cylinders. And then the nails kind of have like a squarishness to them. That's what makes them complex, like the fingers, because there's roundness, but then there's like square. But in general, like the top part will be kind of square. And it's kind of, you want to sort of get used to like the proportions. So let's do like some fingers. So one, this is if the fingers are like kind of doing a lot of different things. Sometimes they're just kind of together. I like to just play around like this just to see if I can kind of like break the fingers. So one, I kind of want to get a little bit warmed up on drawing the fingers. So yeah, you kind of need to like warm up. So let's say that these are closed. So that's like that first set of knuckles, and then you've got this one, and so it starts to get more square like as it's bending. And some of it is based on anatomy, like, because I know about like the knuckles or whatever, like when you're looking at hands you might want to kind of think about that. And then it's also based upon the look of it. So let's just draw that box. So there's that box thing right here. And then there's like the thumb. But this is the kind of stuff I would just kind of play around with. And there's like a wrist bone. Then yeah, you can always redraw stuff. I mean, there's a lot to it. You can like do a different iteration. You can do like foreshortening. I wouldn't even mess with foreshortening until you kind of get a handle on this, so to speak. So kind of like this, you can take this one and then kind of move it around. But see, like the thumb can do a lot. And just play around with like different shapes. And yeah, be willing to make mistakes. Like this one, maybe it actually, it's kind of like this. I mean, it may or may not work. But that's why the gesture is kind of important. But yeah, if you're looking at reference, you might want to see if you can at least get like the gesture. But yeah, if you look at the figure drawing playlist, there's different exercises for how to draw the hands. Like you could look at your own hand and do this. There's a lot. I mean, I'm not trying to say that drawing hands is easy. I think drawing the head was like took a long time for me to learn, and then the hand is probably like I'm still learning, honestly. Just because it just has a lot of stuff going on. Just to kind of start to wrap up. Sometimes I'll just doodle like different shapes just so I can kind of see. You might want to move them sort of together just to like this. The hands can look all sorts of different ways. And then I won't get into it here because I think it's pretty complex, but you can kind of and yeah, I do have videos where I kind of talked about this, but this is like the foreshortening. And you kind of just have to like experiment with it. So let's say that like I said, you kind of have to play around with that. Part of it is just looking at the way someone else draws it. So this is kind of how I'm doing it, but you can kind of see how other people solve the problem. Like, there's ways of figuring that out. So for example, you have to just kind of play around with it. Like this, basically, just to see. And then just kind of redraw. There's not really a secret to it. If there's any secret, I would say it's understanding forms, understanding like construction. So for example, if you draw that box, and then if you're looking straight onto the fingers, like the box is already right there, like that's the front of the box. And then that's the muscles of like the palm. And then the thumb could be kind of right, like could sometimes be facing, but you have to kind of play around with that. And then the tip of the finger could be right here, and that could be a cylinder. Because the hands do all sorts of things. And then this could actually be folded. Maybe, I mean, I'm playing around with like the forms to see if it actually could look like that. And then the nails sort of square off like the fingertip. And then you can redraw it. I mean, if it looks a little too weird, like maybe, I mean, that kind of looks like a finger, so maybe we'll just turn it into like right here. Yeah, sometimes you have to make adjustments. So I'll just turn that into like the fingers and then put the thumb. Now I'm using my own hand now. That's kind of a reference, but kind of like this. So I'm not saying don't use reference for sure, but like if you can kind of work out some of this, that's kind of good too. So kind of like that. You have to just kind of play around with it. Like every once in a while, it's good to just kind of focus on it for a while and just fill up like several pages. So this one, if we turn that into the pinky, yeah, and just fix your mistakes. Let's say you scribble something like this and then you want to figure out how to I mean, that's not even bad. I mean, that could work as a sketch or a drawing. You could just redraw just kind of like the outline. So if I look at this, like the basic shape of it is kind of, there's the knuckle of the thumb, and then like the top of it is sort of square. I'm just going to go like this. I don't know, I just kind of like making up stuff. Then you can kind of look at your own hand. Looks like kind of like this. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Play around with it. It's pretty quick, like easy to fill up like a couple of pages worth of sketches, and that's really like for me like the best way to learn. Just kind of take some of these ideas and doodle it and see if you can mess it up and get something that looks okay, and then yeah, look up reference and see if you can deconstruct it and see how you would draw it and stuff like that. Or sometimes like the whole point of it is just to get like all the little details and stuff, but I tend to prefer being able to just do this and then add detail. That's kind of like my methodology or approach. But that'll be it for today, and that'll be it for now. I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine, and if you enjoy these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it, and until next time, keep on sketching.